Hello, everyone, and happy Monday. Welcome to another AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. We are very excited to be joined by a special guest today. We've got Sammy back on, who's the VP of Corporate Development at C21. Very excited to dig into some recent exciting third quarter financial results lately, as well as kind of get a check-in on where we are in the cannabis space at large. I will say, if you're out there and have any questions and comments, I'd like to invite you into the conversation. You can put them in the chat. And we take them on every platform except for Instagram. With all that out of the way, Sam, we're talking in the beginning a little bit, but how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your Monday starting off?
Happy Monday. I'm doing great. Aside from getting over the flu from the little ones passing off all the bugs at this time of year, I'm doing great. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about our AR results and the space and what we should be thinking about.
That's good stuff. I will say, I will also credit you on your wardrobe choice. I feel like you're going to be bringing a little relief to, it's been a tough time. So we'll talk through it. It'll be good. But maybe, that's probably the great, point to start kind of walking through those third quarter financial results.
Yeah.
You posted them at the end of the month, looking pretty strong. And I think an interesting positive story in the cannabis space. Can you kind of walk us through the highlights and then we'll kind of walk through it?
I think it's our strongest quarter, at least that I can remember. I don't think we've ever had a quarter where every single result was up across the board. Excuse me. So, there's a lot to discuss on how we got here. I mean, the main catalyst for us was the M&A that we did in 2024, where we acquired a third dispensary in Reno. And that's really kind of been the catalyst for us to kind of start to, deliver accretive results for our shareholders. So, sales are up 22% second half of 2024. We're not seeing that anywhere else in the space. The new store itself it's quite remarkable because there's two types of growth, right? There's the kind of inorganic M&A growth of just acquiring something and hopefully you acquire it for an accretive price and it brings value that way. But, there's also the organic growth, which we've really been missing in this space, lack of same store sales growth. And we've managed with the new store in the first 6 months to drive 90% growth in that store from us taking over kind of the first month to December. We don't really see that in the space. And if you look at the jump in our operating income, which is my new favorite metric to kind of focus on in the space, it's up 220% quarter over quarter. It was up in Q2 as well. Our quarters are a little skewed. So these are our December 31st results, but it's our Q3 because our year end is now March 31st. Even us getting these 31s out within a calendar month, I don't know if anybody's ever done that. To get a quarter out within the month, that's kind of what the big board stocks do. So we were kind of excited to do that. But, free cash flow, so the jump in sales, the jump in margin, and, we lowered our SG&A by 10% and all that kind of drove cash flow. So cash flow was, up 60%. With that, we were able to, we are paying the principal down on the debenture that we did to pay for that store. So again, like we did with our 30 million senior note, we're not just servicing debt, we're kind of paying it off. So that'll be paid off next year. We paid some 280E. We paid off a legacy mortgage. We retired out of our Oregon discontinued operations, so we don't have that hanging over us anymore. We increased our cash balance. So just across the board, everything is really humming for us. Nevada's not that case right now. Like most, like most state markets, it's struggling with price compression. It's struggling with sales. Whether it's intoxicating hemp that's kind of eating the market share there, the illicit market in general. Nevada's a unique market because of tourism and Vegas and stuff, which really drives that whole state. So is the consumer kind of inflationary pressure still affecting that industry? It's hard to know how much of each of these components is affecting it. The state was down over the comparative period, was down 4%. From the research that I'm kind of doing, a lot of that is being felt in Vegas. So one of the weird things that happens in Vegas is the state legal cannabis companies are not allowed to service the strip. So they're kind of a bit off strip, but they're not actually allowed to service the hotels and the casinos and stuff like that. And intoxicating hemp is.
I was going to say it's weird because I think last time we were in Vegas for, I think, the Money Show, just walking around, definitely you could smell there was something going on. So I guess that's
smoke shops, around there. They're all like, they'll take you in the back room and they've got, they have illicit California product. They have intoxicating hemp and it's cheap. And it's going to be really hard for the legal, state legal businesses to compete with that. So I'm hearing that Vegas is kind of where that pain is being felt in that market. We're not really feeling it up in the north. Our legacy stores are doing really well. So, we're a unique company. We're small, obviously, with 3 stores, but we also have 3 stores that kind of do 10 million plus in sales per store. Yeah. You just don't see that in the space. So we're really well positioned. We have no net debt aside from our 280 that's accrued, and we are paying some 280. So we're trying to stay on top of it a bit, but we feel really I would say positioned well for offense and to kind of continue to rinse and repeat. I noticed Can Investments, Nick had posted, the thing that he took away from our quarter was the same store sales result that we've managed with the new store with the M&A.
90%.
That ability to kind of rinse and repeat that, where we find assets that maybe aren't performing, as well as, we think they can, and we kind of can, squeeze more out of them, let's say, than beyond just, M&A of adding a top line revenue.
Yeah. And for that new store in general, do you think it's more kind of location? Obviously, being off the strip is an advantage because you're not, again, competing with sort of the illicit market or sort of hemp. Is it choosing that location? Is it, again, the things that you're running in the store? I know you can't give us, the whole secret sauce in terms of how you're able to with that crazy growth.
Our secret sauce is we're price leader, and always have been. And we offer everybody's products. So we have 700 SKUs. So, it's a one-stop shop, kind of the Walmart. It's funny I say Walmart because we're actually adjacent to Walmart Supercenter with that new store in kind of a really affluent, growing area of South Reno. And so, we focus on making sure the customer experience is really good. Our bartenders are fantastic. We want everybody to feel like they can get everything they want in our store at the right price. So that whole experience, is, I think, crucial to getting the repeat. That's what our business has always been. It's been locals, and it's been that kind of repeat client that we manage, to drive now probably somewhere around 600,000-700,000 customers a year, right? So
that makes sense in terms of because I think, again, creating a tailored experience and kind of matching up, the bud tenders and kind of what you're offering to customers is, hugely important, kind of the name of the game. In terms of what the client has been, after looking for, has that changed at all? I know we've definitely seen kind of a distressed customer last year, just because I think things are expensive. Has anything changed? What is sort of the customer looking like?
I can't remember if we've talked about this, but the customer transactions, have remained firm. So you're not losing the customer per se to hemp or to illicit or to anything. What we're seeing is the squeeze on the basket, right? And what, portion of that is price compression, right? An eighth in Nevada tends to be closer to 20 now. But it's, the consumer maybe doesn't have as much money in their pocket anymore to spend on, this kind of discretionary spend. So, I think the Nevada basket's probably down $10 or something like that. And that's going to hurt, right, across the board. And so people tend to be favoring the value product, the entry level products, things like that. It's not that there aren't people interested in the top shelf stuff, because there are, but that's more select. And I think everybody has gravitated to get the biggest bang for the buck product.
Finding the most value. Yeah, I think that totally makes sense across the board.
And I think we see that across the board in everything, right?
Restaurants.
That's not exclusive to cannabis, right? It's restaurants. It's the experience that everybody, with the price of housing, with the price of fuel, with the price of groceries.
Yeah. And I think that's always true. Even I know, again, very true in the sort of current environment across the board. But I think most people want to feel like they're getting value, getting something extra for what they're paying for. Obviously, no one's super happy to overpay for stuff all the time. But that's super interesting. Is it sort of similar to, in terms of consumers, is it similar to, I think, how alcohol operates, where there are, a very limited pool of people who are spending a ton on sort of the product. Is it similar in that way, or is it?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, and
it was like that.
we've seen those studies come out, in the last few months, actually, where the daily cannabis consumer now has actually surpassed the daily alcohol user, right? So
Yeah. Okay.
that's absolutely the industry's driving force, is that kind of, heavy user, let's call it, or repeat user, the daily user for sure. So, that doesn't mean that you're not seeing new customers come in. Maybe as it becomes less taboo,
Of course.
more normalized, you're going to get, people trying to experience, edibles and drinks and things like that for sure, right? So
Yeah.
I was in the store locally, and when I was in there, I was waiting in line, and there was a young kind of woman in front of me, and she was saying how she was going to a party and she just wanted, to kind of fit in, but she doesn't drink alcohol. So she, wanted a low THC kind of, drink or two to kind of fit in. Right. So you're seeing that kind of thing happen, creep into, the normalized kind of societal experience. Right.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, we've even seen things, I think really before drinks really have picked up popularity, but things like Death Wish for seltzer water for people who don't want to drink alcohol, because there has been kind of that departure from alcohol, but now looking to other things because people still want to have a little bit of fun, and that can be found in kind of the low dose. And then I guess you said no hangover, and probably I think fewer calories for anyone who is doing a fitness related New Year's resolution. Although I don't think people are doing resolutions very much anymore. Everyone I talk to they're off of it. They're like focused on other things, which I get it. There's enough to focus on.
There's enough on this day and age for sure.
That is true.
Oh yeah, no. Kind of circling back, you named the number, and it was up for us, and we're really excited about kind of the path we're on, the trend that we're seeing in our stores, in our business, and we think we have a great model that we can kind of rinse and repeat. And I mean, we've already stated this. This has been our goal. We've now kind of proved that our strategy is successful. I would argue that the return on invested capital of our M&A last year is, I have not come across anybody that has accomplished what we have as far as return. If you look at the jump in our net operating profit, kind of annualize that, this store is kind of paying itself in a year. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's, it obviously gives us confidence to kind of stay the course. In fact, that's, I think, what Sunny said in the press release. We intend to stay the course, right? This is working. Our business is working. We pivoted probably years ahead of the industry at large, where we focused on kind of fixing the balance sheet, paying off the debt, and we can kind of be on offense now. And yes, we're small, or a single state operator. So some people say, well, it's easier for you, but I can also make the argument it's harder for us, right? I mean, a larger percentage of our revenue goes to just being a pubco. Like 10% of our revenue is just pubco costs, right? Whereas if you have a larger revenue base, it doesn't have as much of an impact. So, we're doing it, we're proving it, and I think it's a good sign for the space at large that, and we're seeing green shoots elsewhere. It's not just us, right? In Canada, Canara had really strong results. Rubicon, High Tide. There are green shoots in the space where there are operators that are, efficient operators, successful operators, showing that there is a path here. That being said, the space overall has a number of, issues and problems that have to sort themselves out. And I think there's no bigger issue for the public cannabis, U.S. public cannabis, than, the fact that we don't have any investors.
Yes. That hopefully again will come again. I think continually putting up numbers like these, I know there's a balance between how much do the fundamentals matter versus, federal change or something like that. And I think there is a balance there, but I do think continually putting up strong numbers, really shoring things up is, obviously a positive sign, obviously something that you want to keep doing. And I do think, kind of like you're saying, I know sort of the focused but mighty element, I think, is important, just because I think a lot of people, when they're looking at the cannabis space, maybe only look at the top 3, top 4, something like that in terms of size. And I think it's a good reminder that sort of, there are some strong performers.
It's all relative too, right? It's all relative. I mean, we're 20 million market cap. So, the bang for the buck, right? We're punching above our weight, like by far. And so returns are returns, whether you're investing in a big company. You know, some may argue that there's more risk in a small company, right? But you could argue there's less risk because, you know, we only have one market that has to, that has to work, right? So, I mean, there's lots of ways to look at this space, but, you know, I was speaking with an institutional investor after earnings, who's kind of still in the space, but he had to close his fund. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of that, like, you know, the last remaining family offices and small funds that are in the space have, you know, been forced out with this last kind of 6 months with the election and, you know, the drawdown post-election and the uncertainties about reform and kind of, are they ever coming? When are they coming? But, you know, he still kind of holds a couple names, and, you know, he was remarking how strong our results are. And then you kind of see the market and he's saying it's really hard for funds like that to underwrite the risk of cannabis, right? The risk of the, you know, 280E, the reform, like the space in general, when, you know, the solid results don't yield any returns. And it was interesting. I'd never heard it kind of expressed that way before, but it was an interesting point that, you know, to draw that institutional capital to the industry, ultimately these companies have to, you know, show positive returns. Otherwise, it's not going to be interesting for anybody, right? So,
of course, yeah.
And how do you kind of get the investors with the custody challenges that we have? They've never been worse. You know, we hope that these things are going to be addressed by the, you know, new macro focus on debanking and kind of, you know, that cannabis is going to somehow be included in this. Although, you know, the Tim Scott hearing this week seems to be like it's excluding cannabis because it's very specifically federal legal businesses. But we've also heard that's, you know, SAFE is likely going to be, you know, put on the table again. And, you know, we don't all want to, we certainly don't want to talk about it again, and we don't want to go down that road, but ultimately we need it. You know, the industry needs it. And until we kind of have safe harbor and custody, we're going to face this challenge of there's just not enough incremental investors. Even if these companies, you know, look, the more these companies show results, the more you're going to have people dabbling on the edges. Smaller family offices will certainly play if there's value to play. So, you know, the more people that can do what we've been doing, the better. And we're going to see results in, you know, less than 3-4 weeks from the big companies. So let's see where everybody is and how they're managing, you know, the headwinds in the industry.
I think that's totally fair. I would love to talk about kind of investor appetite a little bit more generally, because I feel like we've seen a little bit more kind of towing back into risk thing. I know we were kind of joking before about some of the kind of meme coins and things that have popped up, but I think that has been, to me, is sort of a sign that people are kind of taking on more risk again. Do you think that translates over to cannabis? What's your sort of, I don't know, view on that?
We certainly hope it would. You know, I think I was saying to you or somebody else, the Trump meme coin traded more notional in the first few days that it, you know, after it launched than the U.S. cannabis industry has to date. That's a problem, right? And it shows that, you know, money's there in the markets, you know, like you said, exposed to this kind of crazy risk, but, you know, has not found its way to this space for the variety of reasons we've covered ad nauseum in this industry, right? And the most important one, obviously, is where these companies are listed and the custody, the lack of prime brokerage, just makes it really hard. So, you know, when you see $50 billion notional trading in a meme coin, you know, in a day, it's like
crazy. And probably disheartening, putting up good numbers and things like that. I understand. But again, it's that long-term focus, I guess, ultimately. And I think
head down focused and believe in the markets that, you know, in time, if you deliver results, investors will come.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And I do think there is some element also of just seeing how quickly things can change, like how much, you know, money we were talking about had moved in is kind of crazy. So it's out there. It's just sort of getting some of those few final things addressed, I think, in some ways. So that totally makes sense.
But, you know, crypto is a really interesting, you know, animal in that, you know, for the most part, because there's the argument, does it have an actual intrinsic value at all? Like, you know, what is it? But, you know, crypto's trading upwards of $60 to $100 billion a day. And it's kind of starting to rival, the big boards like the NASDAQ in its notional volume and stuff. And you kind of say, why? Is it just that it's so volatile that traders can kind of, make, substantial returns in short periods of time in either direction? Is it, have we entered a new age in investing where, the lack of focus on the long-term kind of appreciation of an asset, right? Like of finding value and sticking with it. Are we in new times that way? Or, is Buffett always right? Right? Like
Yes.
I ask myself this, right? Like what's happening with the markets? Is he just not the 94-year-old that's too old now and doesn't get it? Or is he ultimately right? And the meme coins will never hold their value because they don't have any intrinsic value to hold, right? Like, we're going to see.
We will see. I do think it's probably one of those things where in the short term, even though it doesn't feel short term, it's not a month, it's, years, I think upon years that things have been a little bit disjointed. I think eventually, whatever, chickens come to roost, and I think things adjust at some point, and I think money will eventually flow into, I would imagine, the companies that it makes sense to, that are putting up numbers, I would think. But again, I think we can see that sort of disconnect for a while.
And we have a bifurcation that's happened in the industry as well that we can't ignore, right? Like this used to be all boats rise with the tide. If you think back to it, we're actually one week away from the all-time highs anniversary, right? February 10th, 21. So 4 years short a week of the all-time high in the industry. And if you think back then, everybody participated, and it wasn't just there, it was in the macro too. Every company participated in the rally back in 2020, 21. You think of NFTs back then and kind of the craze. And it is, even in the macro, it's not that way anymore, right? Like value companies in general, micro caps have not participated in the Mag 7 rally and the crypto rally. So it is a bit more bifurcated that way. But our industry at the more micro level has become bifurcated in really the basket of companies that took on too much leverage and are really feeling the weight of that. I brought up our operating income, right? Ultimately, if your company isn't generating enough net operating profit to cover the carrying cost of the capital, right? And it's such expensive capital in this space, and the best companies, like what we're the operating margin that we're at and the operating margin that GTI's at, is still not enough to kind of cover the cost to carry if your debt is equal to your revenue. If you're kind of a 1-to-1 ratio, it's next to impossible. So we need this kind of external force reform to kind of help the industry with lower rates and with access to capital and all these things that a lot of these companies are so starved for. There are companies that are self-sustaining that don't need the markets like us to get from here to the eventual, hopefully, relief for this industry. But unfortunately, there are a lot that do. And so, when you're investing in the risk of the space, the irony, of course, is that those companies are the ones that likely outperform if we do see reform, because they're the ones that need it most, and they're the ones that have been most beat up. And so sometimes people still, want to have exposure to that kind of risk for that reason. But as we've seen with, State House and a bunch of other names, that risk can hit you fast when, when the creditors call and say, time's up. So just, be mindful of what you're investing in this industry, because there's a lot of risk, and there's a big 2026 debt cliff coming for the majority of the names in the space. And, we've seen some take really proactive steps. I think of GTI and TerraSend pushed out their maturities to like 28 and 29. They don't have any near-term kind of risk that way. And they did it in a way that it was, I don't think there was any equity kickers or anything, so that, it wasn't diluted to shareholders. It's just, the rates are still double digits in this space. But, if you can have success like that in solving the near-term risk, that's fantastic for the space. Hopefully all of these companies have that in early 25 to kind of get that scare of the 26 debt cliff pushed out to buy time for the industry.
Yeah, I definitely was going to say, I think there is definitely something to being able to buy time, especially as we're trying to kind of shake out what the student administration is going to look like, what kind of things we can actually get out of it. I do want to talk about that quickly, but I did see a question that I realized we didn't drill down as much into Nevada, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Had seen Jungle Jane, uh, which is great, or Jungle Java Jane. Can't wait for the next bolt-on dispensary. Imagine getting the first one done and seeing the immediate results. Hopefully lessens the time on the next one. That did remind me, I just wanted to sort of see, like, in terms of growth and expansion and things like that, it sounds like, again, you have a great system in place. What are you looking to for sort of growth on a company level? Is it sort of, again, are you keeping an eye on other states at all? I know it pays to be focused in some ways. What's sort of the balance there in terms of?
Yeah, no, I mean, we talk to and listen to everybody, and that could be other states, but our near-term focus is absolutely Nevada. We think that the return for us is highest there.
Sure.
We have the big cultivation facility that we can, continue to kind of scale as needed to support the full vertical of all our stores. I think we can probably support the fourth store with what we have anyways. But yeah, it's absolutely rinse and repeat of what we just did. It's finding the next kind of accretive bolt-on dispensary and making it, hum like the ones that we have. So that's definitely our focus right now. Awesome. We're not allergic to Vegas. I know I was kind of talking about Vegas earlier, but we would probably be focused more on the locals kind of Vegas, neighborhood market type stuff if and when we make that leap, because that's our model. So we're not really going to go fight for the tourist.
I was going to say, would you want to make that decision after there's some sort of addressing of hemp? Is that sort of in play? Would that be sort of like a catalyst to consider it as a market if hemp gets hemmed in, or if we see more crackdown in the illicits?
No, I mean, I think we're willing to look before. I mean, inevitably, hemp, we know, is at least pushed out for a year, right? Mm-hmm. And from what we're seeing at the state levels, where there's been pushback in New Jersey and Florida tried to include it in the bill, and then it got removed, and mm-hmm. it's a beast, right? And it's probably going to be hard to put back in the bottle, right? Mm-hmm. So we almost have to assume we have to live with hemp.
Sure.
And hopefully it becomes regulated and tested and, exposed to the same kind of safety measures that the state legal industry has, mm-hmm. And taxed, right? Like all the things that we have to go through.
Yeah.
That'll level the playing field. Ultimately, if they put, intoxicating hemp on the same playing field, then I think the state legal cannabis will win that battle. But right now they have too many unfair advantages, right? So, but going back to the question, yeah, we're absolutely focused on the rinse and repeat of what we just proved that we can do. So
again, if it's working, I feel like, keep leaning into it. I feel like that totally makes sense. Yeah. On the hemp side, I feel like there has been, some companies that have sort of gone if you can't beat them, join them a little bit, or, have it as an optionality kind of element, which I think makes sense. Has that been something that's on the radar, not on the radar? Again, trying to run a focus.
Not for us personally, but I'm very much aware of it and paying attention to it. For the larger companies, I totally get it as a strategy. Mm-hmm. It's not that big of a capital intensive kind of, outlay to begin with, the way mm-hmm. that, we saw Curaleaf and GTI do it. They're towing the line, and they're kind of making sure it's not too capital intensive to kind of start. Sure. And ultimately waiting to see which direction, I think most people, the general consensus is that beverages are going to survive. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the efforts of the state legal cannabis go, is into the beverages. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody's necessarily trying to play in the flower, the intoxicating hemp flower space.
There's edibles, but I think it's a lot of drinks and yeah.
So, but no, for a smaller company like us, I don't think it makes sense to, divide our energies that way. We don't even know what the returns are for that. Right. There really is no results to see that that's something that's worth even entertaining at this point. I think, as Boris said on a recent interview, until it's $100 million for them, like, they're not really even going to talk about it. Right. So until we see that it's having some sort of beneficial, outcome, mm-hmm. to me, that's just an outlay that could be much better used in what we do well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, put the focus in where the focused element has been working. So I think that makes sense. All right, well then I did want to just kind of touch on the macro, because again, I know most people on are probably aware of just how things have been and kind of the setup for 2025. I just wondered if you had any sort of thoughts. I know it's been kind of beaten to death in some ways in terms of
It has.
hitting.
Yeah.
Without some more information, I think it's hard to talk through. But what's sort of your sense heading into 2025 of sort of the landscape, how the table's set, what you're looking at? What are your thoughts there?
I'm looking to see if Trump is a man of his word, right? I mean, did he make that promise to buy a few more votes for the election, or did he make that promise because he intends to follow through? I mean, I think he tends to be, what he says he tries to, stick to. That's what we're seeing that outside of his other promises, right? We're seeing that.
Trying to take Canada, trying to bring you in as a state. Yeah, I know what
No, but so that's obviously where the focus is. Does he deliver on safe banking? Does he deliver on rescheduling? Rescheduling's so complicated right now, right? With the hearings being delayed and with the unknown of, a new DEA administrator and a new attorney general. And, where are they going to listen to Trump? Are they going to, stand on their own 2 feet about what they think about this issue?
Yeah.
We just don't know. And that kind of uncertainty, unfortunately, is what the markets don't like, right? So there's a reason why, the industry's been cut in half since the election day, right? It's unfortunate, but it's that uncertainty. And it's ironic in a lot of ways because, yes, we knew what the Democrats had promised and, are quote unquote favorable to cannabis reform, but they had 4 years and they didn't deliver it. So if anything, a fresh start may be a good thing here.
Yeah.
I don't want to get on the let's bash, Schumer and Booker and, Biden and such, but ultimately they made a lot of promises and, they failed at delivering the promises. So could they have done anything to expedite the rescheduling process? I don't know. I mean, he started in October 22. It's not like he started it in the last month of the election process.
True, but it's a long process. I think probably could have taken into consideration a little bit how long that process would be.
Sure.
I don't know if it was sort of one of those things that was kind of banked as potentially an election boost. If he had gotten it done right around the election, I'm sure that would have probably had a positive impact, just given how popular polls and all those different things. So I don't know if it was miscalculation or just not prioritized as much. But yeah, I do definitely think the new administration, in terms of how they're approaching other issues, definitely seems willing to move fast and break things. I think
there's reason to have optimism around the banking for the simple fact that there's such a focus right now on the debanking. Unfortunately, the focus is on crypto and the conservative tech space, but ultimately the absurdity of cannabis banking, and shining a light on it. I know there are senators that are pushing that, and there are people in the House that are pushing that. So it's insane. It's insanity where we're at with this industry, whether it's the 450,000 employees of state legal cannabis that can't bank and can't get loans and can't get mortgages and insurance and things like that, whether it's the taxes being collected yet there's no representation for all this taxation. Something has to change. The market certainly seems to be suggesting that nothing is changing in the near future. So when you add intoxicating hemp and the uncertainty of reform and the lack of growth in the space, can you kind of get a sense of why the space has trended, the way it has? Yep. And the unfortunate part is there's not a lot of, even though there's bifurcation in the results of the companies, there's not a lot of bifurcation in, how the stocks perform. For the most part, it's still a unison basket of U.S. cannabis, right? And for the most part, we all just kind of go wherever the reform headwinds or tailwinds take us. Yep. So that being said, head down. All these companies should just be focused on becoming more efficient, stronger operators, finding growth, solving balance sheet issues, and getting set up for when that day comes. So
being ready when it comes, hopefully. I think that is true. I definitely think also partially moderating responses, I think, because I feel like news coming out of the new administration seems very kind of, I know when the nominations were being made before the inauguration, I feel like a lot of not chain jerking, but I think people were very excited about Gates because of the cannabis element, and then that didn't happen. So I think taking time to digest things is probably going to provide a better experience, kind of going through.
That doesn't happen anymore. Come on.
I know, whatever, but I think it's important. All right. Well, I think this has been great. I think great to touch base, of course. Thanks again for so much insight. Any cannabis products that you've been trying lately that you're hyped about, that you like, that have been good?
I was in Colorado for family for the holidays,
Mhm.
and I tried some Wana gummies there that were just
Nice.
phenomenal
Great.
for like sleep, just for like end of day kind of calming
Mhm.
down. They were pretty skewed to like CBN and CBD. There was
Mhm.
some THC, but they were fantastic. I wish we had them here. We don't have them where I
Right.
am. Locally, I use a lot of Village Farms flower. I really like Pure Sun Farms products. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm a flower guy for the most
Yeah.
part, and just dry vaping. And I like edibles. I like the drinks as well, but on a daily kind of basis, I find that flower you really have a lot of control over the dosage, and if you just want a little bit of a mellow, evening, as opposed to I'm going to take something that might, lay me out. So
I think that's good. That's solid. Again, a nice little wind down, I think, is nice without kind of knocking you out is a key thing. So that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Everybody out there, thanks for joining. Really appreciate you being here, being on, asking questions, which have been great. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we're gonna have Dan Aarons on talking a little bit cannabis, but also an interesting new theme, which should be coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. Noon Eastern, of course, as always. Thanks again, and we will catch you
thank you,
next time.
Nancy.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.